This is Beyond the Resume, the podcast that brings you the stories, advice, and insights behind some of the most successful people in real estate. Beyond the Resume is brought to you by Jackson Lucas Executive Search, the industry leader in human capital solutions. Here is Chris Papa.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Tim Henkel. Tim is the SVP at Pennrose, based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Chris.
I appreciate you coming on here. So you were at Pennrose. I mean, Pennrose is a very large affordable housing developer and management company, right? I mean, can you just explain to the audience about Pennrose?
Yeah, sure. So Pennrose has been in existence for almost 40 years. And so we've had an evolution of partnerships, but started in Philadelphia as your sort of traditional historic rehab specialist. The 1986 Tax Act that birthed the low-income housing tax credit program changed the trajectory of Pennrose sort of forever. We became affordable housing developers and combined that with our historic rehabilitation specialty, and then evolved from there geographically and with the type of developments that we were specializing in. Soon came new construction. Soon came interest in neighboring states, New Jersey and Maryland, Delaware, and then we've grown and grown from there. Our growth pattern has been by seeding regional vice presidents in specific places. So creating boots on the ground with the philosophy that development is a very, very locally executed business, especially on the new construction side. And so we now have 6 regional offices at present up and down the coast.
And then how many units do you guys own and manage now? How big are you guys? Approximately.
So we've built about 18,000 units. We self-manage about 60% of those, about 9,000 units under management. And that's something that's growing at about 1,000 to 1,500 unit a year clip.
You're involved in the development side, correct?
Yes, correct.
What is the difference between affordable housing development and market rate development? What are the differences in how the project is done and entitled and all that jazz? I mean, it seems like, the product is, the tenant, I guess the final product, it looks similar, right? One is subsidized, the residents seem to have subsidized housing or something along those lines. But what is it like during the development process? Like, what's the difference there?
Yeah, it might be easier to talk about the similarities. The differences are many, right?
Yeah.
Physically, the product can be very, very similar. We're creating a multifamily housing opportunity. We're working really hard to make sure the quality of product, the drive-by visibility is every bit what a market rate developer would create and what a market rate product would be. And we do have market rate developments in our portfolio. There may be some differences product-wise in some of the very, very, very flashy amenities that some of the very, very, very market rate, housing development. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, we're amenitizing at a pretty high level and attributing space to community buildings, fitness rooms, gyms, things like that. The differences do come in the income restrictions. So the simplest difference is that we're not allowing ourselves to rent to people who make certain incomes, and it's a calculated number based on area median income. So it's not the same rental rate every place. It depends on what the median incomes are, where your project is going to be. And, market rate development doesn't have that restriction. In exchange for doing that, we're using affordable housing resources. And the one that we all talk about often is the low-income housing tax credit. Federal credit. Many states have state credits that are used in combination. And that tax credit, by obligating yourself and agreeing, hey, we're going to rent to an income level that's at a certain cap, we're granted or compete for and are awarded low-income housing tax credits, which become then 75% of the capital stack of that project. And so that's the big difference, is that the capital stack looks much different. Capital stack on a market rate project is going to be 65, 75, 80% debt, depending on what part of the real estate cycle you're in when that property gets put in place. It's almost the inverse on a low-income housing tax credit or affordable housing project.
And then how are you competing for those tax credits? You compete against other developers? Like, who is giving these tax credits out, and like, what are they looking for? Why do they award them?
So it's a federal tax credit, but the allocation is given to each state per capita basis. So a state with a large population has a lot of tax credits to dole out, smaller population, smaller volume of tax credits. And those states use something called a qualified allocation plan. That qualified allocation plan basically sets out the rules by which those tax credits are distributed. And that's where a lot of public policy comes into play. Each state will say, hey, we would like to use this resource in order to create affordable housing, but we want to create it in certain spaces, places, in certain instances. And that's where the competition starts. So those rules manifest themselves in a scoring system. Scoring can be location-based. A lot of criteria are readiness-based. So they don't want to allocate tax credits to somebody who's not ready to use them right away. And we then, yes, compete against other developers who are trying to get those tax credits. And each state will kind of have a little bit of trailing history that they can communicate to you as to, hey, for every $2 of tax credits requested, we give out 1 tax credit, or 3 to 1, or 4 to 1. And that's that competitive landscape is something that has been increasing more and more. Those credits they're all that's out there in many cases. And so projects will live or die as to whether or not they can get them. And so we've built our business around making sure we compete well, we know the rules, and put together competitive applications.
So it's like a report card, basically?
It's worse than that, A tax credit application is a pretty intense thing to prepare. There are a lot of consultants who help developers prepare tax credit applications. We internalize that process and implement a lot of quality control measures to make sure that our efforts, at least, you could put a perfect application in and lose just because there are so many other perfect applications, joining you. But we really work hard to make sure that we've got it pretty buttoned up.
And what do you look for when you're looking for a development project, and like, how do you know where to go and like where they're going to be? Because not every community wants affordable housing built there, right? Or is there like a mandate for certain communities to have a certain amount or something like that? Like, how do you know where to build?
Yeah, it's an interesting couple layers that you put on top of each other. So I've just described, hey, there's a point system in each state that says this is how you compete for tax credits. So we take that point system and we kind of use it as our divining rod and say, well, we're certainly not going to try and initiate an affordable housing development someplace where it can't score, can't compete, and can't get these tax credits. So that's job one. Then, so you say you found a place that scores perfectly, and sometimes intentionally, those are very hard places to develop. There's a lot, there's potentially some opposition. There's some difficulty in finding a site that people won't object to, whether it's immediate neighbors or other criteria. And the places that affordable housing tends to have happened very readily are the places that other market forces haven't necessarily picked up. The affordable housing development can't afford to pay a ton of money for that land. So the path of least resistance is often municipalities who have come to the realization that affordable housing is something they need, something they want, something that is the lack of is causing displacement, causing people who, the next generation who would love to live in town has to leave town because there is an affordable option in town. An elderly generation that would like some senior affordable housing. So those are the places where we tend to want to go and try and do affordable housing. And that's, that again is kind of the path of least resistance, in the place where some pretty other healthy competitions go on between ourselves and other developers to get those opportunities. Because basically you've got a place saying, we've already built the consensus around this use in this location. We just need somebody to execute it for us. Now, the other thing we do is go to places and say, hey, you really could use affordable housing. We become like we light that spark and spend a little more time and engender the rationality and try and educate folks on, look, it can be really nice. Don't be afraid of it. You want us to do this. You need it. Check your demographics. You're losing people. You're not providing this opportunity. You have a great downtown that could use to be livened up with some bodies, and talk about the economic development power of an affordable housing development in certain cases. Those are exciting projects, and those are the ones we really enjoy the most. They have a real spillover effect. Many of our employees come from planning backgrounds and public policy backgrounds, and they know what kind of vitality can come with a development located in the right place.
Yeah, speaking of a specific project, are there some or one that kind of stands out to you? Like, this was got this done. It was really hard to get through, and just it sticks out in your mind.
Well, there's no your listeners won't hear me roll my eyes. The eye roll kind of goes with the complexity implication there is that, right now there are no easy projects because of the layers of financing that have to be put in place, and because of some of the there's a little toxicity in the environment right now. We're facing, it won't be an unfamiliar word to anybody really. The NIMBYism is kind of on the rise, which may come with a with a YIMBY, a yes in my backyard kind of backlash. I'm kind of hopeful about that. But yeah, there's a project that I guess for whatever reason is one of the first that jumps to my mind because it's had that, kind of that lifetimes of life, which is a project that we've completed 2 phases, at least some up in Meriden, Connecticut, suburban Hartford, if you will, to the extent that Harvard gets to have suburbs. Yeah, but a town that had a downtown had a mall that got that basically had been built over a storm sewer pipe, a large storm sewer pipe that then with development and increased water flow, that mall flooded 3 or 4 times, and it got put together 2 or 3 times, and finally it got demolished, and then finally it became an Army Corps of Engineering project, and then along the way, we were asked to be the kind of the go-between. We were selected by the local housing authority and the city in combination to help effectuate a land swap between those 2 entities to get housing authority property out of the way of the flood control project and to get city property into the relocation destination, all the while with this flood control project becoming this beautiful reclaimed and recovered park with a beautiful stream that runs in between and runs a little high sometimes, but is now also the downtown. It's at the train station. We're seeding retail there. We've occupied over 150 units of housing there. And then we're looking around and really eager to see the next thing happening, the economic development kind of part of that. Those bodies are shoppers. That's disposable income. Yes, they're affordable residents, but they absolutely are people who eat, shop, consume, and can really get a downtown going again. And that's one that's it's got some beautiful imagery. The architecture we accomplished is very, very cool. And the park is, a beautiful thing as well. And I think whenever you kind of seen the fruits of real collaboration where we kind of had to lock arms and trust each other in ways that maybe hadn't happened before, there's something really special about that feeling. It's like, hey, that was worth it. That was hard, but that was worth it. And those tend to be your better groundbreakings and grand openings. And people there in that city and in that state should be really proud of what they accomplished.
It seems like a lot of your job is bringing people together. Is that most of what maybe nobody knows what a developer actually really does, but like, are you out there like talking to different municipalities and different, do you work with like nonprofit groups too in the affordable housing world? And then you got to bring the architects in. Like, what does an affordable housing developer do?
Yeah.
What's your job?
Like, we often have our own vision of how things can be done and where our development could go and what it could look like and all those kinds of things. But I would say that it is true that most of the time we're hearing someone else's vision and turning it into a feasible reality and hopefully not leaving much or any of that vision on the table. So a lot of nonprofits are behaving, and operating very locally and executing some of those visions. They're chartered to meet existing need. And then many times they get to the point where we go, we know exactly what we need to do. And we know definitely we can't do it on our own. And, we love to be there when that next question is asked, who can help us do this? Or what will we do? So as developers, we contribute a ton of time to that conversation. Yes, it often leads to business, but it sure doesn't always lead to business. It sometimes leads to a competitive process that picks somebody else. But certainly being at that early stage and meeting the people who have decided in their heart of hearts and in their nonprofit volunteering and their boards to do this is a pretty powerful moment because you're really at the very start of a building process where the building process itself is the very end. That's the finish line. I'll tell you about one project that we've. Well, a couple of projects that we've done, but we've been working really actively in the Boston area on a project that is targeting LGBTQ seniors in an affordable setting. But that project started with a LGBTQ task force that came and visited an LGBTQ senior building that we did in Philadelphia with another partner. And so they heard about it, came down, visited our property, and then spent some time trying to figure out how in Boston or the Boston area they could site something like that. And they found a recently vacated school building. It's called the William Barton Rogers School in an area of Boston that is just like perfect. A structure of, one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever seen. And that is thankfully converting very nicely in our design process. We're not yet funded. We're not yet near closing, but we're working hard, and it has a ton of support because it will not only serve a population that that task force has wanted to serve, but that a good part of Boston, is eager to show their support for. So that kind of consensus building is a lot what we do. Then also, as many schools will, there are a lot of accessory spaces that won't convert to housing, but will convert to house some other nonprofits. So some community groups that will take up residence in the space. And so you could just imagine then the activity that goes on and the focal point that it can be for the community. And, people start to get goosebumps. We're really, really excited about it. And we have many projects that start that way. In fact, in Cincinnati, on the heels of some of the work that have been done, with a product like that in Philadelphia and in Boston, sure enough, in Cincinnati, there's a group that wants to do exactly the same thing, and we are. So
sounds extremely rewarding beyond just being like a job.
Yeah. I think you'll find in this industry there are a lot of I call them life's work people. People are not kind of trying to get from the beginning to the end of the career with enough money to retire. They're really working for the for the work and for the outcome and the impact. And it makes for, like we talked earlier about the competitive atmosphere. You're competing against other developers for the opportunity to do work on behalf of a city. You're competing for the funding, competing.
Yeah.
I would say like it's a pretty friendly competition. We root for each other's successes. Maybe not of our own, but it's not hard to be happy about projects that other people can complete. We are fighting an uphill battle. The demand for affordable housing is exceeding the pace of our ability to supply for lots of different reasons. When you meet the residents and you speak to when you hear them speak about the impact that an affordable housing opportunity gives them, it's almost like, okay, now that I've got this part figured out, I can focus on my kids' education, you name it. It's just like, if you can fix one thing, the next thing can follow. And for so many people, that housing is building block number one. And what comes along with it is a lot of health benefits. So there's just a ton of wellness that goes into that moment of relocation. When that person moves into one of our new affordable housing developments, so many times where they're moved out of is such a substandard condition. And, I say substandard, we all think leaky pipes, but in many cases, it's an overcrowded situation. It's they're living in someone's basement. They're, two households crammed into one, and now they can separate. And, we all know that overcrowding right now is a real negative health determinant, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's the moment we're in. So the people who, work for us and for other developers, but certainly for the people that we employ, and when we're interviewing folks, we're talking to people who really kind of they're coming at this for a reason. There probably are other ways for them to make a living and maybe make a better living, but they want things to matter, and that's they want their day-to-day to matter. They want to be able to look at what we've accomplished and see who's benefiting from it. And the interesting thing is those rewarding moments are the development process is slow. To get to that first occupancy as a newer developer, to get to the first occupancy of a development that you really did start from the very beginning. You would think when the idea came about at the genesis, as they say, that probably is somebody who's worked for our company for 3 or 4 years. They've seen a lot of completions, they've seen a lot of things open, but not the one that they started. And so I love that moment, and I think we work really hard to make sure that we see it coming for newer and younger developers, and that we give them the opportunity to let it sink in. And you got to feel good. There are a lot of hard days in between.
Yeah.
So watching them feel good is pretty exciting.
That's awesome. Is there a difference in how you guys do a lot of new development? Do you guys do like a preservation of affordable housing too? Is that
we do
separate?
Yeah, we do. Most of our preservation work has been in the RAD space. RAD is the rental assistance demonstration program that's converting public housing to a public-private partnership, and so we, with that conversion of the subsidy comes the ability to recapitalize, add debt, to resyndicate some tax credits, 4% tax credits, put that money back into a rehabilitated development. And that's a different animal because those are often occupied properties. Sometimes there's a temporary relocation, but sometimes it's in place rehab. And we're doing one of those right now in New York City, and it's large scale, and it's a uniquely different thing in that when you close the transaction, you immediately have a fully occupied property as opposed to a new construction development where you have a year of construction or so to get ready for that new population. So it's a different animal, and there are things I love about it, actually. And I guess, one of the things would be just what I was saying is that proximity to the impacted residents, the resident population that is inherited, and the ability to kind of take charge and fix some things immediately that were the pain points of potentially the relationship between prior ownership and prior management. That's good for everybody.
When you're a developer in this world, are there some people that just do new development and some do preservation, or is it kind of like a mixed match, or is it separated generally?
I think we all have our bias in one direction or the other. I think that I think it's very rare to find a developer who started out doing both. And even if you throw market rate development in there, whether it's new construction or rehabilitation, we started doing everything at once. And so we all have our history, the place we came from, and those starting points tend to be always core competencies and true skills. So for us, it was, as I said before, it was historic rehab, affordable. So that kind of rehabilitation, just major rehabilitation. We're talking gut rehabs using historic, and then new construction, affordable, and then preservation, affordable. With some market rate, what we call opportunistic market rate in between, where we saw ourselves creating some value and creating an opportunity to nearby or next to some of our affordable housing developments to put up market rate product, and where we knew the market really well. But we still are at our roots what we started out as.
Speaking of starting out as, how did you start out? Where did this interest in affordable housing or development come from? Did you grow up in a family that did that, or did you just fall into it somehow?
Well, I guess everybody, everybody has their windy path. I went to school as an engineer. So I graduated from Bucknell as a civil engineer, and I got into engineering, without a lot of I knew that's what I wanted to do. It was more like, hey kid, you just graduated from high school. You're good in math, good in science. You should be a civil engineer. You like to be
my dad and my sister are civil engineers. So I know the type.
Good math, like to be outside. You're a civil engineer. I have to prove that was a good decision.
Right.
I really enjoyed the education. I enjoyed my time there. I worked as an engineer for a number of years, and kind of realized that engineering management and the future of, even if I were to be the owner of an engineering company, it wasn't really going to be the right thing for me. Yeah. The people who hired me, the people I worked for were great people. And that was a hard reckoning to say, all right, I'm gonna shift gears here. But what had happened is I'd become exposed to some developers, and I could tell that their financial savvy and their kind of knowledge and their ability to take what to me seemed like incredible risks was all based on really just a real evaluation and understanding of financial risk. And so at that time, that was 1998. The formula for that problem was an MBA. Yeah. And I would still stand by the quality of an MBA, but at that point, that was a pretty common thing for people to do. So I went, studied finance and entrepreneurism, and graduated from the Simon School, which is the University of Rochester.
Are you living in Rochester? Are you from Rochester? Or are you living up there?
No, I've always had a New York State pull. I did in my early childhood lived upstate, and so it was a place that felt good to me. My wife was working at the time in a job that had her traveling upstate in the financial industry. So it made sense for us to relocate there. They had an 18-month program, which meant I could get in, effectively mid-year, and started in January. So it was my first semester was the second semester of a traditional two-year program. And that, by the time I decided that I needed to make a change, and then all of a sudden I was in a big hurry to make the change. So that 18-month program was really, really perfect for me. As is the case, I stick a lot of loyalty in the places that I touch, and so I continue to be involved with the Simon School. I'm on their alumni board, and I would tell you it's a fantastic place, undergrad and graduate school to go to school. Very diverse university with a lot of schools, and so once there, I was there with the goal of becoming a developer, but most of my colleagues were there with the goals of becoming analysts on Wall Street or consultants with the big five consulting firms into big CFO positions and things like that. So I was a little bit of an outlier. So my career search was very self-directed. I, of course, went back to the developer clients that I had as an engineer, did a lot of informational interviewing, and it was a, yeah, you don't want to work here, but you might want to talk to kind of thing that got me meeting with Rich Barnhart, who's our CEO and now my partner. One of my partners, the other is Mark Dambley. I got them on the phone and quickly had an interview, came down, and we were at the time in one of the office towers in Philadelphia, One Liberty Place, and I was awestruck with the fact that, and all the while, of course, researching affordable housing. What is it?
Yeah.
Taking those, the quick affordable housing for dummies course just to really.
You couldn't really Google back then, though.
No, very limited. We had the internet back then, but it wasn't fully. But yeah, and I thought the intersection of a company that was exercising really financial skills with powerful positive impact, with the touch of not the engineering background that I had, but the physical development part of it. There was something about never leaving an actual product behind. I really wanted to have a product. I didn't want to be not that our banker friends don't have products, but I need to be able to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden my eyes were opened to the potential that that I could invest myself in this kind of career. And of course, I got the pat on the back and the walk down the hall and sorry, we're not hiring right now. And that came back around. I almost took another job, and right at the last minute, I got a worse offer from the perfect job at Pennrose, and I took it.
You've been there over 20 years now, right?
Yeah.
You're a partner in the firm?
I'm a partner. I became a partner in 2007. That was obviously an important moment for me, and something I remain grateful to my partners now for. I had a pretty clear feeling in my gut that I not only did I want to do this forever, but I wanted to do it on my own behalf. And I thought that I could do that best with Pennrose and at Pennrose. And fortunately, they agreed, because I don't know what the other path would have held for me. But I think that I heard this from a regional vice president of ours as we were interviewing him, and when he accepted the job, he said something to me that I realized was the reason I accepted the job at Pennrose and sought out a partnership there. He said, the reason I'm going to accept this job, and I've talked to my family, is because I know I can produce more affordable housing with you than I could on my own or on a different path. And so, it counts in this business. Certainly, that's how we keep the lights on and that kind of thing. But it's a measurement of what we've accomplished and the people we've accomplished it on behalf. So that was my motivation at the time.
That's great. You've been there. I mean, most people today, I've been in my company for 15 years, right? And people are like, wow, I can't believe you've been there that long. Like, there's a lot of moving around. What kind of mentality do you think you bring or you brought early on in your career that kind of kept you there, or made them say, hey, Tim, we want Tim to be here for a long time? What did you bring to the table?
Well, I don't know if I want to put myself fully in their heads, but I would say that for sure, this job has not been the same one year to the next, and that Pennrose has been working towards its next generation, its next definition, for lack of a better word, all the time. So I was kind of doing that. I wanted to be more of a developer. I wanted to be, more responsible. There's a little bit of that drive goes a long way, in a company. And so when we were a 3 or 4 development a year firm, that was great. But wasn't it great the year we did 10 deals in a year for the first time? Mm-hmm. And that's where I got really interested, is then the company that can do 1 or 2 deals a year is not the company that can do 10 deals a year. So when you're going to do 10 deals a year, what do you have to change? What about your management model? I don't mean the management company of the properties, but your management of your business. What needs to change? How do you need to restructure? What do you need to show as an infrastructure to banks so they'll lend to you comfortably when you've got that kind of volume? And I enjoyed, sort of involving myself in some of those conversations or opining on those things. And it was a little bit of the things I had learned in business school, and maybe more specifically learned from my classmates in business school, because that's where a lot of the learning takes place. And that I think that then that's how I started to present some value to Rich and Mark as partners then, as a potential partner for them for the future, because it was clear that I was not just part of the energy that would build next generations of business, but also I had an interest in it, and an interest in seeing what it could become. And that's been really that's been really exciting. The exciting part about it is now the people who have come along, the people who work for us and the people we get to work with. It's a great cast of characters.
Do you think people in development come from all different types of backgrounds, right? Like my uncle's a big developer. He was a lawyer. Some people just think my grandfather was a developer. I don't think he graduated college, everyone went to college, right? And so, do you think having, engineering background was beneficial? And what would you say to those people who are engineers right now? They're like, man, how do I get into, I want to be like Tim. How do I get into development? Like, what do you suggest to them?
Yeah, the crack in question is how do I crack in? How do I get in there? I can't find necessarily, there's not another guy in our company who was an engineer, MBA, became a developer. So I'd hardly say that's the only way to become a developer. It's just one of the ways, it's where I came from and where I ended up. But if you are that engineer, the young version of me now, or anybody else, the answer is still the same. You gotta learn the business from the outside a little bit, and then convince, if you're interviewing with us, convince us that this is what you want to do. Because if there's one thing about all those different development people you just referenced and those folks that you've crisscrossed, is that they're all in. It's not a dabbling profession, right? There are intense moments, there are late nights, there are schedules that get dictated to you as opposed to schedules that you get to control. And so you want to know what you're signing on for. And then, there's the actual raw skill set that is really important. Financial acumen, I think, that's the entry card in our office. We need to know people, know a pro forma. When I was doing my research in order to have that interview and not sound like a complete, greenie, the question that, I was told by someone, look, if you can learn affordable housing finance, you can do any kind of real estate finance, and which isn't entirely true because there's absolute specialty in market rate real estate and in every other real estate sector, office and industrial, that are every bit as complicated. But the complexity of the capital stacks we put together tends to require a skill set where people who are going to sit down and look at the pro forma and look at the budgets that get a bond deal done, they have to have special aptitude. And if they're just interested, they're missing an ingredient.
Yeah. Awesome. An amazing story. Thank you. Are you ready for the hot seat?
The hot seat.
You feel hot? You getting hot in here?
Yeah.
Now, any books you recommend, whether it's affordable housing, real estate, life, any books that you go to?
Well, I'm really concerned about sounding cliche about my book selection.
Don't worry about it.
I really love the good to great, kind of books. I love Michael Lewis books. Mm-hmm. And the book that I would recommend right now is not necessarily an industry book, but it's a topical book. Am I forgetting the name of the book? The Fifth Risk. It's I don't know. Oh, The Fifth Risk. It's amazing. And it really will, maybe at a moment when we all need it, it'll give you some faith back in government, because it tells the story of what all those complicated departments actually do, and why it is that historically our government has been the innovator, why the Department of Energy has created so much innovation, even the CDC, and some of the safeguards that have been put in place, some of them somewhat dismantled today, that would have that intellectual power survive administrations. So The Fifth Risk is really about the handoff of one administration to the other. It's a little bit scary because
I just wrote it down. I'm going to order it.
Yeah. You'll enjoy it. You'll have a hard time putting it down.
I usually ask if there's any podcasts, but now that we're in like this COVID time and everyone's trying to find different TV series to watch, have you been watching any good TV series?
No.
Nothing?
I'm really, I'm a really bad TV watcher. So I am unable to binge beyond like the fourth or fifth episode. I just, fall apart. I do listen to podcasts though.
Okay, go for it.
Well, so the guy who's got me hooked right now is he's a Stern School of Business, NYU Business School. He's a marketing professor named Scott Galloway. So it's the Prof G podcast. He kind of starts it off like with a lot of like sort of merger and acquisition kind of technically stuff, but he often has really he's really good guests. He had a guy named Richard Florida on. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's done a ton of. He's an author who wrote the book called Creative Class. Creative Class was like very very, I think, early in the conversation about what cities really are and why this creative class is so important, and why those people want and need to be together, and how they feed each other to create, great ideas and creative things. And so at the time, that was a kind of a planning book. It was like, these are the people you want. It was, create this incubator sort of setting. And I'm probably doing a horrible job of describing this guy's book.
It sounds great. I'm intrigued, man. I want to listen.
When you get so this, Professor Galloway gets Richard Florida on the line. That's a really interesting conversation, because Galloway is advancing the theory that this COVID environment is an accelerant. It's not a disruptor. It's not changing. We're not doing things differently. We're just going the direction we were going a lot faster because we have. And I'm sure he's not the only one who said it. I'm certainly not originating the idea. But when he talks about that, when you get the idea of an accelerant and you think about like the creative class and where cities are trying to happen, and how cities are going to exist in the future, it's a great lens to think about different things that are going on. I think about the word eviction right now is taking on a completely different kind of characterization than it had before. Are we accelerating to a different model of eviction, of the pressure you put on a non-paying renter? I don't know the answer, but I like the structure to think about it with.
No, great topics. I mean, those are great things to think about. Things are changing in front of our eyes, and hopefully, you don't know if it's going the right way or the wrong way, but things are definitely changing. People are asking questions that they never asked before. Now, what do you like to do outside of work?
I cycle. I ride my bike. That's my answer to two questions. What do I like to do, and how do I relax? So which is not to say that you'll catch me racing on the weekends or anything, but I have I've ridden a bike for exercise for a long time. I was a runner in college. I was a sprinter runner. Okay. So sprinters don't get into distance running, and that's all that's really available to us, after college. Nobody's challenged me to race a block anymore. Thankfully. So the low impact, cycling kind of stuff where, you get speed, you get to ride fast, and you get to go places. And so the older I get, the more I kind of get on my bike and just go and see something and, and enjoy being outside. So that's what I like to do.
Yeah. I did some sprinting early in my life too. And then the transition to like longer distance running was just brutal, very brutal. I'm like, I'm not at the end yet. I want to be at the end, What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Oh man. I have had a couple life-changing events. We all have, right? So, but there have been a couple things that sort of, you think about your life as a windy path. So, sometimes that path winds pretty hard to the right or left. And I don't know what I would have told myself other than to tell myself that's going to happen. The notion that, things are going to be straight and narrow and easy, which at 20, that's all life had shown me, a pretty good life, neither, super wealthy nor, desperately poor, somewhere in the middle and okay. But, no real hardships, married parents, everybody's alive, all good stuff. I have 4 children. My third and fourth children were twins. One of the twins was diagnosed with a disease in his first year of birth. He died at 13. He would be 16. Wow. And so his diagnosis, his life, and his death, obviously, were, bang up life changers. And I think that if I were to tell my 20-year-old self, I don't need to tell my children this because they've had this experience, but I think any 20-year-old who's had the good fortune of having a pretty smooth ride should be aware and empathetic to a degree that a lot of people are going through a lot of stuff and have had some hardships, and that creates anxiety, and it creates fear, and it accounts for a lot of behavior and opinions that people have. I think at 20, I was like, hey, the world loved me and I loved the world. And that's immaturity, but it's also lack of experience. And for all of my father's a minister. And so for all of the hardship that I watched him manage on behalf of his congregations and things like that, I never really absorbed it. And, maybe that was my own personal rocky head. But that would be my advice to anyone is to know it might not always be easy, and to help others who aren't going through an easy time right now, because that's going to be you at some point.
Thanks for sharing that. That was great. And my condolences for that. It must have been difficult.
That's a whole different podcast, Chris.
That's a different podcast. Yeah, I'm not going to dig into it. What do you, I mean, now I'm a recruiter, right? I work in the real estate industry. I'm sure there's people listening to this that are trying to find jobs and become developers and maybe become the next Tim Henkel. What do you look for? It doesn't have to be specifics, but like, what do you look for in hiring people generally? Like, you're not speaking on behalf of Pennrose, but just in general, like, what type of people do you like to work with?
So I really enjoy the interesting story. Someone comes in who like sort of knows who they are. You can imagine, as I've just said, right? I wish my 20-year-old self had a little more depth. And so when someone comes in and they've come from someplace and they know what made them sort of who they are, that story can take on all kinds of varieties. But, the person who is able to tell it and to tell it in a way that relates to, and that's why I'm interested in this job. Well, that sure helps. That's magnetism. And that's a person who can then deliver themselves as a developer to, the nonprofit who wants to execute their vision. That person can have that conversation and can evolve into someone who's a full-scale developer, know where you came from.
Good answer. Well, Tim Henkel, partner and SVP at Pennrose, thank you for spending your time with us. Appreciate it.
It's been a great time. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Resume, a Jackson Lucas podcast where we take a deep dive into the career journeys of some of the top minds in real estate and equip you with the knowledge to move forward in your path towards the success you've envisioned. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond the Resume. We're grateful for your support. All episodes of Beyond the Resume are brought to you by Jackson Lucas, building inclusive and diverse businesses through talent acquisition. Visit us at jacksonlucas.com.